I knew I was falling before I knew I was dead. There was no wind, no rush of air, no sense of speed, and no distant ground racing up to meet me. There was only darkness and the undeniable knowledge that I was dropping through it. My stomach tightened, my arms jerked outward, grabbing at nothing. I tried to scream, but there was no air in my lungs, or maybe there was no throat for the scream to climb through yet. For a few impossible seconds, I existed as panic without a body. Then memory returned to me in pieces. The hospital, the pressure in my chest, my wife crying beside the bed, a nurse saying something, the ceiling tiles above me losing focus, and my own heartbeat becoming a sound from another room. And then it stopped, and then I died. And the moment I understood all of that, the falling stopped. My body dropped the last few feet and landed hard in a leather armchair. Pain shot up through my spine. Air burst from my mouth. I grabbed the arms of the chair and lurched forward, gasping, blinking, trying to make sense of the room that had appeared around me. It wasn't heaven. That was my first clear thought. The second was worse. It might be hell. The room was dark, damp, and old. The stone walls rose around me, slick with moisture, water sliding down them in slow threads. The lights overhead buzzed weakly, giving everything a tired yellow cast. The air smelled faintly of mildew and sulfur with something stale underneath it. I sat there breathing it in, still gripping the chair, afraid to move and more afraid not to. Directly in front of me was a desk buried beneath paperwork. Folders leaned in stacks, loose pages spilled over the edges, filing trays overflowing, coffee mugs sat everywhere, each one stained black inside. An ancient computer monitor glowed at the center of the mess. Behind the desk sat a demon. There was no gentler word for it. He was enormous, crocodilian, broad through the shoulders with dark green scales, a long snout, and yellow eyes magnified behind thick bifocals. He wore suspenders over a wrinkled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. His claws moved across the keyboard with annoying precision. Above his head, mounted crookily on the stone wall, a red neon sign flickered. Welcome to hell. The demon did not look up. He clicked his mouse 3 times, sighed through his nostrils, typed something, clicked again, then muttered, "No, Majorie, you may not appeal on grounds of spiritual inconvenience. You poisoned 2 husbands and a bridge partner. Enjoy the corrective swamp." He clicked once more, shuffled a paper into a folder, and finally lifted his eyes to me. "Dennis, wonderful. Another expression of total surprise." I stared at him with my surprised face. "Where am I? Am I dead?" "Yes." "Is this hell?" "Technically, no." "Technically?" The demon leaned back in his chair, which groaned beneath him. "This is hell's waiting room. The distinction doesn't matter much, but I'm contractually obligated to be accurate." I looked at the sign again. "It says, 'Welcome to hell.'" Marketing insisted." "This has got to be a mistake," I said. I had the immediate impression he had heard those exact words more often than anyone in existence. "Of course it is. Every soul says that. Nobody arrives and says, 'Ah, yes, fair enough.' They all come in with paperwork they never filled out and confidence they didn't earn." No, you don't understand. I was a Christian." "Were you?" "Yeah, I believed in God." "How marvelous for you." "I thought I was going to heaven." At that, he rolled both eyes so dramatically I thought they might disappear into the back of his skull. Then, with no warning, A long reptilian tongue slid out of his mouth and swept across both eyes. I recoiled in horror. God! Wrong one. What was that? I don't have any tear ducts. The scales and bifocals are a wretched combination. Would you prefer I blinked politely and suffered in silence? I'd prefer not to be here. And I'd prefer a staff of competent assistants and a chair that doesn't smell faintly of monk. Life disappoints. Death continues that tradition. I tried to steady my breathing. I'm telling you, man, I believed in God, I prayed, I went to church. The demon folded his claws on the desk. Would that God happen to be Anu? I stared at him. Who? He shut his eyes again, this time with deeper exhaustion. Anu, Father of the gods, Lord of the heavens, source of all divine authority, true ruler of the cosmos. Very old, very important, not currently enjoying strong brand recognition. I've never heard of him. That has been a persistent problem. Tremendous authority, terrible outreach. You're telling me the one true God is someone nobody even worships anymore? Yep. Old Mesopotamian deity. That's insane. It's theology. The two frequently overlap. I sat back, feeling cold despite the damp heat of the room. So, everyone got it wrong? Not everyone. There are always a few. Anu has his loyalists. Small group, though. This can't be how it works. And yet, observe that it is working. I looked again at the miserable office. The stained mugs, the flickering lights, the endless paperwork. The red neon sign? This is hell? A dingy office with bad lighting? The demon laughed. It was a harsh grinding sound that filled the room and shook a few papers loose from the nearest stack. Ah, Dennis. Again, technically not hell. It's the waiting room or administration. What are you then? Sardonyx. Intake administrator. Third receiving office. Western soul distribution arm. Occasional unwilling therapist. Full-time witness to mankind's magnificent inability to choose the right God. You decide where I go? I process your assignment. So what happens now? Now, we determine what sort of hell best suits your educational, spiritual deficiencies. Deficiencies? Yes. Hell is not a punishment. Not in the old shouting and pitchforks and fire and brimstone ways, although some do get that. Hell is correction, purification, instruction. You arrive with your soul carrying defects, and those defects must be addressed before paradise can receive you. So I'm being punished. He tapped one claw on the desk. You are being taught. Punishment is not quite the same. Punishment requires that you suffer. Education requires that you change. And when I learn, you ascend. To heaven? Yes. With God? With Anu. Do try to keep up. What if I don't learn? Then you remain until you do. How long? That depends on how deeply attached you are to those spiritual defects. He continued more quietly now, though the sarcasm never fully left. Every soul reaches paradise eventually. Every one. No one is abandoned. No one is forgotten. Some arrive, recognize themselves quickly, and move on in a century. Others require thousands of years, millions, billions on occasion. Stubbornness is the one human invention that truly impresses the divine. The thought of that much time struck me harder than the word hell had. Billions? Rare, but not unheard of. You should meet the tyrants. Actually, no, you shouldn't. Most of them are your world history leaders, and the other ones are usually on the HOA committee. I sat there dumbly, not knowing how to respond. What did I do to deserve this? I asked. Tell me, did you feel connected to people when you were alive? The question unsettled me. What does that mean? It's a simple question, Dennis. I already simplified it from the original divine phrasing, which involved 17 clauses and a reference to clay vessels. I had people. That's not what I asked. I looked away from him. The truth was that I spent most of my life surrounded and somehow separate. I had a family, friends more or less, co-workers who invited me to things, a church where people knew my name and shook my hand every Sunday. I wasn't lonely in the obvious way. I had never lived in complete isolation, never gone months without conversation, never been the kind of man people worried about because nobody had seen him lately. But connection had always seemed to happen around me rather than inside me. I don't know. Sardonyx waited. I always felt like other people had instructions I didn't get. Like everyone understood something basic about being human and I was pretending. Family gatherings, church dinners, parties, work meetings. I could do them. I knew what to say, but it felt like acting. Were you unhappy? Not exactly. Lonely? Not exactly. The saddest category. Not enough pain to demand repair. Not enough joy to call it living. I looked up at him sharply. He was clicking away. What are you doing? Listening. No, you're typing. I contain multitudes. His attention sharpened on the monitor. One claw rested on the mouse, the other on the keyboard. He clicked back and forth through several screens. The slow smile that spread across his snout made my stomach tighten. What? I said. He kept reading. Sardonyx? Oh, Dennis, he said at last. My friend. I don't like that. What did you find? I think I have the place just for you. I gripped the arms of my chair again. What place? A very effective arrangement, used in many forms across the millennia for souls carrying your particular wound, those who felt outside, separate, unclaimed by the human family, people who spent their lives convinced belonging was something that they didn't need to actually do. I said nothing. The words were too close. It isn't pleasant, but it has produced wonderful results. Eventually. Please don't let it be fire and brimstone. Please don't let it be fire and brimstone. I can't. I don't want to burn. Sardonyx waved a claw. Oh, nothing so pedestrian. Fire has its uses, but your problem is not flammability. I let out a breath and sank back into the chair. Relief hit me so quickly it almost made me dizzy. Oh, thank God. Sardonyx stared. Oh, right. Thank Anu. Progress already, my friend. So, where am I going? He looked back at the screen and chuckled. An apartment complex. Apartment complex? Yes. That's it? Sardonyx looked over the top of his bifocals. That is a dangerous phrase in my line of work, my friend. I'm serious. So am I. Never underestimate the universe's ability to make the ordinary educational. You're sending me to an apartment. A very nice one, from what I've been told. Central air, responsive maintenance, community events. Quite civilized. You're messing with me. Dennis, I have processed approximately 912 million souls. I stopped messing with people a very long time ago. Will I be alone? You'll have neighbors. I will? Thousands of them. Thousands? Potentially millions, depending on how adventurous you become. I felt my stomach tighten. Wait, what do you mean by... Sardonyx clicked his mouse. I arrived in the apartment building in another burst of gray smoke and almost fell over. For a second, I stood there coughing, waving my hands in front of my face, expecting heat, screams, chains, anything that might justify the word hell. Instead, I found myself in a lobby so large that my mind refused to accept it as a room. The ceiling rose hundreds of feet above me, layered with balconies and walkways and hanging lights that disappeared into a bright haze near the top. Marble floors stretched outward in every direction, polished to a shine by the movement of countless feet. Massive pillars held up the levels above, each one wider than a house. Far off, fountains poured water into circular basins, and beyond them were reception desks, seating areas, elevators, staircases, kiosks, signs, and streams of people moving through it all with the ordinary impatience of commuters. That was the strange part. The people. After Sardonyx's office, after that damp little room and the dead quiet between sentences, the noise hit me hard. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages. Shoes struck marble. People laughed. Someone cursed. Someone sang. A group of men in robes argued loudly near a directory. A woman in a business suit hurried past me while speaking into a phone. Two guys chased each other around a pillar until an old man shouted at them to stop running. For the first time since dying, I was surrounded by souls, and the sheer normality of them made me feel less comforted than invaded. I turned in place, trying to understand the size of the building, but there was no clear edge to it. The lobby extended too far. Every direction contained more motion, more entrances, more elevators, more lines of people, and more doors leading elsewhere. Hell apparently had crowd control. A large reception desk stood near the center of the lobby, or what I assumed was the center. Behind it sat a man in a dark suit with silvered hair, combed neatly back and hands folded on the counter. He looked almost human, except for the stillness. His face was pleasant without being warm and patient without being kind. When I approached, he looked up before I spoke. "Dennis Harlow," he said. "How do you know my name?" "You have an appointment." "I didn't make one." "No one does." "Where am I?" "You are in hell. More specifically, Residential Complex 9. You have been assigned a permanent residence pending spiritual correction and eventual ascension." "Permanent residence?" Until you learn what you are here to learn. How long does that take? That varies. Give me an estimate. Some stay thousands of years, some stay several million. There are some extreme outliers on the longer side. The building does not release statistics because residents respond poorly to averages. Several million? It is best not to compare yourself to others. That's easy for you to say. It is, yes. He looked down at a file that had not been on the desk a moment before, turned one page, and slid a key across the counter. You will be on floor 8703. I waited for him to correct himself. He didn't. I'm sorry, what floor? 8703. There are 8,000 floors? There are considerably more than 8,000 floors. My mouth opened, then closed. How many more? That information is not available to you at this time. I looked toward the elevators and back at him. 8,703 is high. Many residents would consider that near the ground. This is insane, I said. What exactly am I supposed to learn here? That is for you to discover. If souls could be told their flaws and corrected them immediately, hell would be unnecessary. Before I could ask another question, a small reptilian bellhop appeared beside me with a brass luggage cart, though I had no luggage. He wore a red uniform with gold trim and a little cap balanced between two ridges on his head. A key ring hung from one clawed finger. Mr. Harrow, I'll show you to your apartment. Try to get along with your neighbors. You'll be seeing them for a very long time. I didn't like the way he said that. I followed the bellhop toward a bank of elevators set into the far wall of the lobby. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, some opening and closing constantly, some rising behind glass fronts already packed with new arrivals and attendants. Mine had a clear front and polished brass doors. The bellhop stepped inside, tapped a panel, and entered my floor number with quick practice movements. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. At first, I expected a normal ascent, the brief pressure in the legs, the passing floors, and the ding. But this elevator moved with maddening patience. The lobby dropped away beneath us, slowly revealing a vast interior I had not understood from the ground. Above the main floor were open levels arranged around enormous courtyards, and each level was not a hallway or landing but a world. I pressed my hands to the glass. We rose past a broad common area lined with market stalls and low buildings. People in linen robes moved among them. Beyond that was a temple courtyard where figures knelt before statues I did not recognize. Higher still was a place of stone streets and painted columns, where men in tunics argued and clusters and women carried baskets through a square. Then came another level with tiled roofs, another with smoke drifting from workshops, another with narrow streets and lanterns, another with lawns and iron fences and horse-drawn carriages moving along impossible indoor roads. What am I looking at? I asked. The building, the bellhop said. I can see that. No, I mean all of this. These people, these places. The complex houses souls from every civilization that has ever existed. Similar cultures and eras are often grouped within compatible floors, though there are exceptions. Each level contains a common area designed to reflect the practices, habits, and expectations of those assigned there. They just keep living? Many do. They work, build friendships, argue, worship, marry, open restaurants, start clubs, complain about noise. People continue being people. We passed what looked like a medieval village centered around a church and a muddy square, though there was no mud on the elevator glass. Above it came a space filled with tents and fire pits where men and women dressed in animal hides and sat around cooking fires. Above that, a floor where men in armor trained in formation while children watched from a rail. Higher still, something more modern, all brick buildings and factory roofs and crowds moving beneath electric signs. I saw Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, farmers, soldiers, priests, merchants, men with powdered wigs, women in long dresses, people in suits, people in furs, people with painted faces, and people from cultures I could not place and had no name for. Every floor held a civilization in motion. Every courtyard contained daily life continuing beyond death, not frozen but extended. Men, women, children, teenagers, people of all ages. It should have been beautiful. In some way it was. But there was terror in the scale of it, in the thought that all of humanity had been gathered, sorted, stacked, and set loose inside a building with no visible end. How tall is this place? The bellhop didn't answer immediately. I don't know. You work here? Yeah. And you don't know? I've been as high as floor 70,000. My stomach tightened. I have never seen the top. No one I know has seen it either. Not in person. The elevator kept climbing. Floor after floor slipped past the glass. Towns, cities, villages, gardens, districts, temples, factories, theaters, farms, all arranged inside the impossible body of the building. At last, after what felt like hours, the elevator slowed. Floor 8,703, the bellhop said. I let out a breath. One more thing. Elevators are for new arrivals only. From this point on, residents use stairs, unless otherwise authorized. Stairs? Yeah. To go down? To go anywhere between floors. As long as those floors are within the civilization you've been assigned to. The rear doors opened into a long hallway with patterned carpet, warm lighting, and apartment doors stretching in both directions. Compared to the worlds below, it was almost disappointingly normal. Still, there were sounds behind the doors. Music, footsteps, a burst of laughter, someone speaking angrily, a television, dishes clattering, lives taking place inches away from me. Real neighbors. The bellhop checked the key tag and led me down the corridor. We walked long enough for the hallway to begin feeling larger than it first appeared. Eventually, he stopped at a door marked 8,703 19C and handed me my key. This is yours. I took it, still staring at the number. I still have questions. Everyone does. What am I supposed to do first? Settle in. What about floors? What about the people? What about getting out? The bellhop lifted one claw. Questions permitted to be answered may be answered by your television. My television? Yeah. I don't understand. He gave a polite little bow, turned and walked back down the hall before I could stop him. I stood there alone, key in hand, surrounded by muffled signs of other people's existence. Then I unlocked the door. The apartment was ordinary. That was tough for me to deal with. A living room with a couch and coffee table, a small kitchen, a bedroom visible through an open doorway, a bathroom, lamps, curtains, a television mounted on the wall. It looked clean, comfortable, and completely sane. Nothing about it screamed. Nothing burned, nothing bled, no chains hung from the ceiling, no demons waited in the corners. I walked to the couch and sat down heavily. For the first time since arriving in the building, silence returned. I looked around the apartment, at the kitchen I hadn't chosen, the bedroom where I was apparently expected to sleep, the television that might or might not answer questions about my damnation, and I understood with a slow, sinking certainty that however long I stayed here, this was no temporary room. This was home. I sat on that couch for a long time after the bellhop left, waiting for the apartment to reveal whatever made it hell. Nothing happened. The refrigerator hummed. The lamp beside the couch gave off a soft amber light. Somewhere beyond the walls, a door opened and closed. A woman laughed in another apartment, distant enough that I could not understand the words. It was all so ordinary that it became difficult to sit with. Ordinary things that are only comforting when they belong to an ordinary life. Put them in hell and they become something different. A couch, a kitchen, a made bed, clean towels. Wouldn't expect that in hell. Eventually, I stood up and checked the refrigerator. It was full, with my favorite stuff. The pantry was stocked, the bathroom had soap, toothpaste, shampoo, razors, everything a man might need. I opened cabinets and drawers, touched plates, silverware, folded shirts, a stack of blank notebooks. Nothing burned my hand, nothing whispered at me from the shadows. No demon crawled out of the closet. I almost would have preferred that. At least then I would have known what my life here was supposed to be like. After a while, the silence became worse than the hallway noise, so I left. The corridor outside looked unchanged. Apartment doors stretched in both directions under warm lights, each one marked by a number and a small brass nameplate. Some had welcome mats, some had wreaths. One had a little wooden sign that said, "Bless this home," which seemed bold given the circumstances. I followed the hallway until I found a bank of signs mounted near an intersection. A leasing office, maintenance, laundry, refuse, common area. I chose the common area. The hall bent and widened. More people appeared as I walked, first in pairs, then in clusters, then in steady streams. Some nodded at me. I found myself doing what I have always done in crowded places, watching everyone for clues. How fast were they walking? Did people make eye contact here? Was smiling appropriate? Was I supposed to greet strangers? Even dead, even damned, I was still trying to pass as a person who was trying to integrate but really was trying to stay on the outside. The common area, it turns out, isn't a room. It opened before me as a vast public space beneath an artificial sky, wide enough that I stopped in place and forgot briefly to be afraid. Paths curved between lawns and fountains. Restaurants faced open plazas. Shops lined walkways beneath awnings. There were small cafes, newsstands, flower carts, bakeries, barbershops, offices, a theater marquee in the distance, and at the center of it all, a park larger than any park I had expected to find 8,000 floors above Hell's Lobby. People were everywhere. Children chased one another through the grass while adults crawled after them. Couples sat close together on benches. Old men played chess beneath trees. A woman in a tracksuit jogged past me with earbuds in. 2 teenagers argued over something on a phone. A man in shirt sleeves carried a tray of hot dogs from a stand where steam rose in white curls. Office workers crossed the park with briefcases and paper cups of coffee. Nurses, doctors even. Someone had spread a blanket under a tree and was reading a book with one shoe off. No one looked tortured. I found an empty bench near a fountain and sat down. For a while I only watched. That had always been my safest position in life. The world seemed to go on by, not caring at all that I had just joined. "You're new," a woman said. I turned. She stood a few feet from the bench, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand. She looked about my age, which I later learned was common in the building. Nobody looked old here. Nobody looked aged. Most people held somewhere between 25 and 30, restored to an idealized body that had nothing to do with how long they had existed. She had dark hair tied back loosely, sharp eyes, and an expression that suggested she had already decided I was harmless enough to approach. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Very. I was hoping I looked mysterious. You look like you're trying to figure out whether the hot dog cart is some sort of punishment." That thought crossed my mind. She smiled and sat beside me without asking, though not so close that it felt intrusive. "Rachel." "Dennis." "I know." I looked at her. "Relax. I don't know because I'm important. I know because new arrivals wear a name tag for the first week." I looked down. A small white sticker on my shirt read, "Dennis Harrow," in neat black letters. "Oh, come on," I said. Rachel laughed. "The building has a sense of humor. Not a good one, but some." I peeled at the sticker. It wouldn't come off. "Don't bother. It disappears on its own." She took a sip of coffee and followed my eyes across the park. "How long have you been here?" "An hour? Maybe 2. How long have you been here?" "A few years." "So, you're kind of new too." "New enough to remember the panic. Old enough to know where the decent coffee is." I looked back out at the park. "Do you understand this place?" "No." The answer came so quickly that I laughed. Rachel shrugged. "I understand parts of it. Enough to function." "How long are people here?" "Nobody knows for sure. The manager said some people stay millions of years." He wasn't lying. "Do you know anyone that long?" "I know people who have been in the building for hundreds of thousands of years." I stared at her. Rachel looked back at me steadily, letting the words do their work. "That's impossible." "We're dead, Dennis." "I know that." "Then readjust your standards for impossible." Hundreds of thousands of years. Man, that phrase entered me and just kept going, finding deeper places to disturb in my psyche. A human life had once seemed long from the inside. 70 or 80 years could contain childhood, work, marriage, disappointments, illnesses, holidays, everything. But hundreds of thousands of years inside an apartment building, riding the same social machinery, meeting neighbors, finding routines, watching communities form and dissolve without anyone aging or dying, was a scale of existence that made identity feel fragile. How long could a man remain himself in a place like this? How long before habits became history and history became your own new prison? What are we supposed to do? Ascend. Ascend where? Up. That's helpful. Floor by floor. That's the idea. You learn what you're here to learn. A door appears, you go through it, and you move to the next level. Eventually, if you reach the top, Anu receives you into heaven. You sound pretty casual about that. I've had a few years to get used to saying ridiculous things with a straight face. How do you know all of this? Your television. My bellhop said that too. Then your bellhop was more useful than mine. Mine told me not to flush paper towels and left. The television talks. It answers questions, some questions. Think of it like your own Alexa, your own AI. It's not friendly exactly, more like an instruction manual that helps you figure this place out. I thought of the black screen mounted in my living room. And it tells you how to leave? It tells you what you need to know. Which is? Rachel leaned back on the bench. You don't escape by hating the floor. You don't escape by pretending to like it either. You have to become part of it. Part of it how? People like us are here because something in us never connected right. That's what my demon, Maldatrix, told me at least. That I never quite fit in. We kept ourselves apart. Maybe because we were afraid, maybe because we felt superior, Maybe because we thought we were defective and didn't want anyone to notice. That's how it works. If you're on this level, it's because you never felt like you belonged." I didn't answer. She looked at me gently, which was almost worse than if she had mocked me. "I'm guessing your demon asked you about belonging?" "He asked if I felt connected to people. And you said?" "I said I had people." "That sounds like something a new arrival would say. I had a family, friends, church. Were you with them? Or just near them?" I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell her she didn't know me, that I had done what people were supposed to do, gone where I was supposed to go, shaken hands and remembered birthdays and did all the right things. But the defense collapsed before I built it. Near them. That was exactly it. I had spent my life near people, often surrounded by them, rarely to join them in any way that felt natural. I don't know how to do that. Most of us don't. That's why we're here. I looked across the park again. So what? I make friends and ascend? If only. The building knows the difference between participation and performance. I mean, we are talking about the afterlife here. Anu, all-powerful. We talked for hours. I told her about sardonyx, though she already knew the basic routine. She told me about her first week, how she refused to leave her apartment for 3 days, how she asked the television whether she was allowed to starve and received only the answer, "Nutrition is provided." We compared deaths with the awkwardness of people comparing surgeries. She died in a car accident, I died in a hospital bed. Neither of us knew what to do with the fact that death had been so final and then so inconveniently not final at all. At some point I realized I wasn't performing. That I was actually having a real conversation with somebody here. Eventually Rachel stood. "I should go," she said. I felt disappointment before I could hide it. "Right." She studied me for a moment. "You can ask." "Ask what?" "If you can see me again." I wasn't going to. You absolutely were." I looked away, embarrassed. "Can I?" "Same time tomorrow, same bench." I nodded. "Okay." She walked off through the park, disappearing into the movement of the common area. For a long time after she left, I sat there and watched people go about their lives. A hot dog vendor handed food to a man in a suit. A child cried because another child had taken his toy. A woman argued into her phone beside a fountain. The world here, filled with the dead as it was, continued. When I finally returned to my apartment, it felt a little bit less than a cell like it did before. It wasn't welcoming exactly, but interpretable. The television hung on the wall dark and patient. I stood in front of it for a while before picking up the remote. The screen came on without sound. White letters appeared against black. "Ask a question." I swallowed. "How do I get out of here?" The answer appeared immediately. "Ascend." I waited, then said, "How?" A longer pause this time. "Advancement occurs one floor at a time. No shortcuts exist. Elevators are reserved for arrivals and authorized transfers. But how does one ascend?" "Belonging." I stared at the word. "Explain." "To ascend from a level, the resident must become part of the society in which they have been placed. The resident must accept the community, and the community must accept the resident. After that, you will ascend to the next floor, where you will have to become a part of the new community." I sat on the couch, still facing the screen. What does it mean to be accepted? Genuine integration is required. Superficial participation is insufficient. That's why you're here in the first place. Pretending will not work. The words held me there. I had pretended all my life. Not always dishonestly, not always on purpose, but consistently. I had learned the motions of belonging without trusting the thing itself. I had treated other people as rooms I could visit but never inhabit. Now, hell had me build an apartment in the middle of humanity and told me to learn what I had spent my whole life avoiding. How will I know if I succeed? A new door will appear in your apartment. Its edges will glow. Opening the door will initiate ascension to the next level, where placement will continue. The next level. Yes. How many levels? Answer unavailable. Of course. I leaned back and looked around the room. The apartment was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty in the same way. Beyond the walls were neighbors. Beyond the hallway was a common area filled with lives. Somewhere in the park was Rachel, who had seen something in my face and named it with care. Above me were floors I could not count. Somewhere at the top, if anything I had been told was true, waited heaven. I had thought arriving in hell meant I had reached the end of something. Sitting there with the television glowing in my face, I understood that my time in the afterlife had barely started to begin. 20 years passed before I understood how hell could become so ordinary. That number would have felt enormous to me when I was alive. 20 years was enough time to raise a child, ruin a marriage, build a career, lose your hair, bury your parents, forget the sound of an old friend's voice, and become the sort of person that your younger self would not recognize. In the apartment, 20 years was still 20 years, but it was a little different the way you felt it. I knew a man at church. Yeah, we had church here, even a Christian church. Old habits die hard, I guess. Who had been on floor 8,703 for 400 years. Rachel knew a woman from the North District who had been ascending through the building for nearly 11,000. There were rumors of residents who had spent hundreds of thousands of years moving upward one level at a time. I tried not to think about them. Most days, that was surprisingly easy. Life had a way of just continuing. Some days I woke beside Rachel and forgot I was even in hell. Then I would remember that there were 8,702 floors beneath me, an unknown number above, and a god I had never worshipped waiting somewhere beyond the final ceiling. The memory would settle over the room for a moment, quiet and complete. Then Rachel would ask if I wanted coffee, and we would go about our day. Floor 8,703 was larger than I first imagined, and then larger than I was able to imagine comfortably. At first, I thought of it as a neighborhood, then a town, then a city, and after years of traveling through it, I stopped using any of those words. By my estimate, our floor was roughly the size of a large state, maybe even a small country. It was arranged in the impossible architecture of the building. It had cities with skylines, suburbs with yard sales, marinas full of sailboats, universities, hospitals that treated injuries, even though no one could actually die, movie studios, churches, factories, shopping districts, airports, and professional football teams with supporters who took the whole thing far more seriously than damnation. There were actors and musicians, politicians and plumbers, street performers and accountants, talk show hosts and school teachers. There were government offices, gossip magazines. There were arguments over zoning laws. This place was huge and larger than it had any right to be. One of the first useful things I learned from the television was how travel worked. If you were inside your apartment, spoke a destination aloud, a door would appear in the wall, and provided the destination was on your assigned floor and permitted to you, it would just take you there. At first, I found this astonishing. I would later stand in the room and say Central Park District, and a door would open where no door had been. Later, I would say work or St. Mark's or Rachel's apartment, and step through with the same bored expectation I once had for elevators. Convenience becomes ordinary pretty quickly. I realized that this was the way that the floor could be so monumentally big, and yet people could still have any job they wanted. I mean, hell was really just Earth. It was Earth in an apartment building, but we all did what we did there. You could choose a career, you could be an actor like I mentioned earlier, you could do just about anything you wanted. And your apartment room could take you anywhere you wanted. Rachel and I made use of the doors constantly in those years. We explored districts neither of us had seen. We spent afternoons walking along artificial coastlines where the horizon was a mural of impossible light. We went to concerts, restaurants, museums, street markets, comedy clubs, and once, at her insistence, a professional football game between the East Atrium Saints and the South Hall Engineers. I understood almost nothing about the local league, but Rachel yelled at the referees with such outrage that I felt a little bit more love for her before halftime. The rest came naturally, which was news for me. We were married 5 years after we met. I remember laughing during the ceremony because the absurdity of it overtook me all at once. Married in hell. Married under the authority of a priest who began the service by acknowledging Anu as true creator, then proceeded through a ceremony so Christian my grandmother would have approved. Rachel laughed too, and the priest told us both that joy was rarely inappropriate and we should use it while we had it. By our 20th year in the building, we had been married for 15. I found work in advertising, which felt ridiculous until I realized hell had products, services, campaigns, and an entirely endless supply of people who could be persuaded to attend festivals that they didn't really want to. The work suited me more than I expected. It required attention to what people wanted, feared, trusted, and ignored. It forced me to think about others not as a vague crowd, but as minds with appetites and histories. I made friends at the office, real ones. People who annoyed me, challenged me, invited me to lunch, remembered small things I said months earlier. I joined the neighborhood watch even. I volunteered at community events because Rachel volunteered first and then continued after she stopped. I attended church, helped organize services, found myself on committees. Religion in the apartment fascinated me. Everyone knew Anu was the true God. That fact was no more controversial than gravity had been on Earth. Yet people continued worshiping in the ways they had known in life. Christians gathered in churches. Muslims prayed in mosques. Hindus maintained temples. Ancient rites long dead on Earth continued beside modern services and private shrines. No one seemed to find contradiction in it. Anu, it seems, didn't really care who you worshipped in the afterlife. Just that you learned your lesson. You purified your soul, in a sense. I only knew that kneeling in church didn't feel too bad. I prayed to Anu sometimes, awkwardly, with the discomfort of a convert who had arrived after dying. I prayed to the God I had known before too. Not because I believed sardonyx was wrong. It just was habit. If Anu objected, he didn't seem to care. Years gathered around me and something changed. For the first time in my existence, I felt like I belonged. I began watching the walls of our apartment, seeing if a door would outline itself one night. Still, nothing happened, but I felt something approaching, or thought I did. One night, Rachel and I lay in bed with the lights off and the quiet of the apartment wrapped around us. The room was dark except for a faint line of artificial moonlight slipping through the curtains. Neither of us was asleep. I could tell by the way she breathed. "What happens if one of us gets their door first?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. I wished I hadn't said it, but once spoken, the question filled the room. "I don't know." "What if it's yours?" "Dennis, what if it appears here for me or at your place and the other person doesn't get one?" She turned on her side to face me. I could just make out her expression in the dim light. "We always knew that was possible." "No, we knew it in the way people know the sun will burn out. Technically, but from a distance." Rachel reached for my hand beneath the blanket. Before she could say anything else, I said, "I won't go without you." Her fingers tightened around mine. "I mean it. If the door appears tomorrow, I'm not opening it. Not unless yours appears too." "Dennis." "No, I finally have this. I finally have you. I'm not walking away from it because the building decides I passed some test." For a long time, Rachel said nothing. Then she moved closer and rested her forehead against mine. "All right." "You promise?" "I promise." "If only one of us ascends, neither of us ascends," I said. She was quiet for a moment longer. "Neither of us goes alone." I closed my eyes, and the promise settled over me with a comfort I mistook for peace. Outside our apartment, floor 8703 continued living. People worked late shifts, kissed in doorways, argued over bills, prayed under different names, watched movies, wrote songs, coached football, fell in love, and built lives beneath a ceiling that pretended to be a sky. Above us were thousands upon thousands of floors still waiting. At the top, if the building was honest, was heaven. For the first time since arriving, I believed that I might actually be getting ready to ascend. I fell asleep holding Rachel's hand. 300 years slipped past so quietly that neither of us noticed when we crossed it. Time had become a strange thing in the apartment. It no longer announced itself with birthdays or gray hair or aching knees. The body never changes, but the soul does. We marked anniversaries because we enjoyed them. Christmas came and went, summers passed beneath the artificial sun. Life continued. Rachel and I continued building our ordinary life together, and in many ways it was happier than the one either of us had known on Earth. We worked. She taught literature at one of the universities while I remained in advertising. I eventually opened up a small agency with 2 friends I'd met through church. The pastor changed several times over the centuries. Congregations came and went as people ascended. New arrivals filled empty pews. Familiar faces disappeared one by one. One night in bed, I said to Rachel, You know, I don't think this place has felt like hell for me for a very long time. She smiled at me. I was thinking the same thing. If a door appeared tomorrow for you, we made a promise. We did. And I still mean it. So do I. That night, we went to bed exactly as we had thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, nights before. I kissed her and she kissed me back and we said goodnight. Neither of us knew it would be the last time. The next morning, I woke to quiet. I called her name. I knew something was wrong right away. Rachel? The apartment answered with silence. I lay there another minute. Not sure, or not wanting to accept what I knew to be true. I looked to my left and saw a folded piece of paper resting on her pillow. Even before I reached for it, I understood. My fingers hesitated over the letter because unfolding it would make it real. The paper felt warm. My name was written across the front. Dennis. I unfolded it slowly. The first sentence was all it took. The door came during the night. I closed my eyes. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to read any further. I simply sat there with the letter in my hands, listening to the impossible quiet of an apartment that had never felt empty. Hundreds of years of shared mornings with Rachel and now it's gone. When I finally continued reading, I just, listen, I would have waited with my door there for tens of thousands of years if that's what it took for her to get hers. I never would have left her. I never would have left her. She sighed and I stepped forward. The light embraced me, and I began the climb.